Today on the Fit After 40 podcast, I'm going to be talking to the Training Gym's nutrition coach, Laura Tonkin. Hello, Laura.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm all right, thank you. How are you?
Good. It's nice to speak to you in America.
Yes.
Which is amazing. Should say, obviously, Laura is in America currently. She was as part of the Training Gyms over in here, but you're actually on a sports scholarship, aren't you? A football scholarship in America.
Yes. I am trialing out currently, so.
And in where? California?
Florida.
Why did I say California? Yeah, Florida. Okay, so it's nice and humid.
Yeah.
Nice and humid. So I think it's amazing, isn't it, that you're able to still coach Training Gym members whilst being away, but
I really enjoy
stay in
it.
touch.
Yeah. It's good to catch up with
so we're
people.
We're gonna talk a lot about nutrition in general, aren't we? But I wanted to just give a starting point of why we think at the Training Gyms that there's no one size fits all when it comes to nutrition, and kind of get your perspective on it and just chat it through. So obviously you've been coaching members now for a while. So why do you think there isn't a one size fits all when it comes to nutrition?
Well, I mean, when you think about, individuals, everyone has their own relationship with food, whether that be a positive relationship or, far too often it's a negative relationship. And I think with that, no one size fits all. What works for one person in nutrition doesn't work for another person. I think when you look at the broader scheme of things, with lifestyle, everyone's lifestyle is different. For example, someone who has kids who are young will not be able to follow the same maybe stricter regime to someone who doesn't have children who are young, who maybe has a little bit more time to cook, spend the time looking up the nutrition of each meal that they're eating. So, and again, sometimes people just generally don't want to spend time looking into their diet. Like, it's just not something that they want to spend their time doing. Some people are generally really interested in it and want to learn about it and educate themselves on it. And so that's why I think there's no one size fits all when it comes to nutrition, because you're going to have to use different tactics depending on the individual. Very much so. I don't think, and I know that you agree, I don't think that there would be a single tactic that you can use universally with every single person.
I agree. And I think that's the problem with nutrition, is because everyone's wanting almost that magic bullet
the
of
answer,
it, right?
yes.
And that's the problem. So they're trying what works for someone else, assuming that it should work for them, but then almost beating themselves up when it doesn't work for them.
Yeah, it's like a cycle. Yes.
Yeah.
And
because if
it
you're
doesn't
not
work
getting any
for them.
sleep, you've got young kids, that changes the game completely. So to try and compare yourself to, I don't know, someone half your age who doesn't have children is just going to cause
unfortunately,
problems.
that is a lot of the people that they'll see on ads, on ads for diets, on ads for meal replacements, or things like that. And then, like you say, when it doesn't work for them, they beat themselves up and they think, oh, it's me, it's my fault, that's why it's not working. I'm just not strict enough with myself, I don't have the willpower. And then it gets into that negative self-talk, which is then super, it doesn't help anybody at all. And it's such a shame, because it's the majority of the people that I speak to are people who go through sort of these cycles and question themselves as to why it doesn't work for them specifically. But in reality, it's just because it's not built around you, for you, around your lifestyle. Because like you said, it doesn't look like the influencer on the ad or whatever they're looking. So it is a hard situation for people to be in. And it's something that's so common in society today, all the ads and stuff. And I don't think it's very good for people to continue to try all these different diets, these fad diets that are out there, and then continue to fail. It's a horrible cycle to get caught in.
That cycle of failure is the thing. And I actually just recorded a video based on should I be listening to influencers? And I was just making the point that you literally see just what is on Instagram.
Yeah.
You don't see the real life. And obviously I've been around a long time now in the industry, so I've been to a lot of courses, seen the kind of the backstage and the way people behave differently to what they're actually saying they do.
Yeah.
And I think that's the critical thing. You just don't know where, what is the reality of that situation. Particularly in fitness, where you've got people that are proposing certain ways of eating, certain ways of doing things, but they're on certain stimulants, certain drugs sometimes, like crazy stuff.
Yeah.
That you just have no idea about. You'd be shocked sometimes, I think.
Yeah, I think even for us in the fitness industry, sometimes it can honestly be hard to differentiate between those two. Like someone who's genuine about, like, I do this and I follow it and it works for me, and someone who's not. And that's even us, like, who are in the industry. So I can't even imagine someone who doesn't have that experience or that knowledge around, doing drugs or stimulants or something like that. We know about that, and we still sometimes get caught out by it. So for people who don't know about it, I mean, they're selling them like a pipe dream, essentially, that it's never going to work. Because again, everyone's looking for that answer. And if someone proposes that answer to you and it sounds good, like it sounds about right, like it sounds like it might work, then it's hard for normal, regular people to sort of differentiate that from someone who you're like, they definitely don't do that,
Yeah, I agree. I think I always worry, or I'm a little bit hesitant when someone is like, this is the answer. This is the thing to do.
Yes.
Now, obviously, like, there's certain things with nutrition where, like, if you were to eat more green vegetables, you'd probably feel like, I think that's a good thing, right?
Yes,
so you can, there's certain things, but when you say you have to eat this many, this amount, or this, like, yes, you can say, like, okay, we want to eat more vegetables, and that's a thing, but not definite you have to eat this amount, for example.
Yeah, I agree.
Even on something that, you're not going to argue that you need to, the green vegetables are good for you. Like, that's not probably a discussion, right? But it's the definiteness. When people are talking with nutrition with, like, absolutes, then I think you have to kind of take it with a big pinch of salt.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of what, in my sessions with the clients, I tend to try and get across is that, hey, look, we're going to try different methods out. We might try one and it fits and it works and you enjoy it and you can see yourself doing that for the rest of your life. But we might try one and you think, that does not work for me with my lifestyle. I find that it takes up too much time. I'm not enjoying doing this. And I certainly don't see myself doing this for the long term. And that's fine too. We gave it a go. It didn't work. We'll try something else. I think, like, when you say, like, I'm going to have the answer for you, yes, it's nice for them to hear. But also I do feel like when you explain it to them in the way of, okay, we're going to try this out, we'll see if this works. And if it doesn't, we'll try another way. I think they also enjoy that too, because I think it's the start of them understanding that it shouldn't be this massive fight to constantly keep having to fight against their willpower to do the diet, to be like putting themselves into like starvation essentially on some of the diets that people do. And I think once they start to realize that, they're far more willing and open to sort of trying out different things and taking their time too, because it's not a quick process like everyone wants it to be, and like people promise it to be online. It's really not. It takes a long time. You really have to sort of sit down and reassess and think, okay, do I see myself doing this for the long term? Is this manageable for me? Do I enjoy doing it? Am I finding this interesting? Do I think this has a benefit for me? And like you said, like there are obviously, I don't want to say there are absolutes in nutrition. There are things that, like you said, eating green vegetables is healthy for you. But at the same time, like if you really don't enjoy eating green vegetables, maybe we'll find an alternative, to that. Like, again, I would want you to, but can we have it in a shake? If you really don't enjoy eating green vegetables, can you put some kale in a shake? Things like that. So whilst there are absolutes, there's no absolute way. There are absolute facts, I feel like, around nutrition, but there's no absolute way to do the nutrition.
Yeah, and to get there, I think.
Yeah, I'm not sure really how to explain that, but there's no absolute method, I guess, when it comes to nutrition, but there are absolute facts, which is sort of where you try and mesh the two together, which is quite hard. But I mean, I find it a very enjoyable process, I'll be honest, when it comes to doing that with the clients, because I mean, everyone's so great and willing and open and honest, which makes it very easy for me to then just be like, hey, how did you feel about this? And then we can make that decision together as to whether we think that's a long-term solution or whether we want to try something else. Or even like maybe like hybrids of different methods. There's so many different methods you can go about it that it's quite fun trying to find the the right one. I mean, I don't know if the clients will feel the same way, but I
yeah,
enjoy
they're
it.
feeling it fun, but yeah, it's like but I kind of think of it as almost a little bit of experimentation. Like you have
Yes.
these understandings, and I know this is potentially going to work, but like you said, it's like, and if you have that act of experimentation, well, then you're not, like a lot of people have this cycle of trying something, sticking to it until they fall off the wagon completely.
Yes.
And then seeing that as a failure, which breeds this negativity around things. Whereas if you're creating that kind of thought of experimentation, this might work, it might not, but don't worry, because there's other things.
Yes. Yeah, straight away you take away that fear of failure, which I think is a thing that most people, I mean, everybody, especially, I feel like also, I don't know if you would agree, but I feel like the older you get, the more that comes into play, perhaps. I'm not sure, just from sort of my experience with the clients. I mean, once you take away that fear of failure, they're very, very open to it and encouraged and interested in doing it, rather than maybe, you know, going into it with a negative mindset, which I think, like you said, with sort of the self-talk and like getting into that cycle, and it's so hard to break out of it. I think it's an easy way for us to sort of break out of that. And people often actually are surprised when I say that. They feel like, they're like, oh, like I thought I was going to be on like a really strict diet. I thought I was going to have to...
a meal plan of some sort.
Yeah, and they're sort of a little bit hesitant at the beginning. Because they're like, I don't know how this is going to work. Because usually when I do a diet and it works, then I feel restricted. I find it hard to do. And for them, that's what they feel like. That equals weight loss. In a way, for them, is like, is it hard? Do I find myself feeling restricted?
Do I hate it? Yeah.
Like, and then they're like, oh, if I don't hate it, then I'm not doing it right. And I always say to those people, I say, well, you know, the diets that you've done in the past, did they work? Well, yeah. But I'll be like, so when you finished it, what happened? And they goes, well, I went straight back up to my original weight, and then usually I add some. And it's like, so it didn't work. Because at the end of the day, the whole point of the diet is that you lose the weight and you keep it off. That's a successful diet for me, right? Like that, and
it's
diet.
It's just a new way of eating, right? It's a new way of
exactly,
a new lifestyle, essentially.
Yeah, and when I say a diet, I don't really I find it tough to use that term, because I think people associate it with like restriction, but really diet is just your overall what you eat. You know, like I have a diet, you have a diet, you know, it's not like a restrictive thing. It's just whatever you eat in a day sort of thing. And I feel like once you can get them to sort of understand that it shouldn't feel that way, then I think some things start to click, where it's like, oh, I've been doing this wrong my entire life and no one has ever told me that I shouldn't feel this way when I'm eating. That it shouldn't be this hard.
That's the thing, I think. It's very interesting, and I think the key critical thing when we're talking about why there's no one size fits all is because most people have tried many, many different things. And I've spoken to people that have lost massive amounts of weight, having done, you know, like, they're less popular now, but like the Cambridge diet and those types of drink style things.
Yeah, like the shake replacements.
Super low calories. But, and I'll say, how did it work? Oh yeah, it really worked. I lost 3 stone.
Yeah.
Okay. So how come you won't do that now? Why are you looking for something different? Like, I could never do it again. It was so bad.
I hear that a lot.
But when they talk about the results, they're like, oh yeah, I lost loads. But I'm like, okay, so how come you won't just do that again?
Yeah.
And it's like, no, I can never do that, because it's so damaging both. Yeah. I think mentally, that's the one thing as well.
I mean, we enjoy
physically
food.
Damaging, but very mentally. And I think that's the thing with nutrition, and when we're talking nutrition coaching, a lot of it is psychology, right?
Yeah.
And mental coaching.
Yes.
Not like, I mean, you can Google what is good food. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, there is a lot of resources out there.
Yeah.
So therefore, it's like, how come there is a difficulty to apply that knowledge? Well, that's because I think it's the ability to, like you said, get to where they want to go.
Yes.
But not in like, they're not going to get there in one step.
Yeah. And
that's
I think
what a diet is, right? One step.
Yeah.
One big thing.
It's funny because you say that, and I often speak to people and they always say, like, I know what to eat. Like, I know what I should be eating. Usually is the phrase that people use. I know what I should eat. And for the most part, I mean, people do have a generally good idea of what a healthy diet looks like. You know, they know that it's more fruit, more veg. They know that it's, you know, maybe a little bit less white carbs, high fiber foods, you know, things that are good for you, high protein. They know that. People understand that for the most part. There are obviously some parts where I think, you know, almost the diets have got to people too much and they really don't actually know what's good for them.
Well, and also it gets confusing out there as well.
Oh, very much so,
you can see some crazy stuff.
Yes, all of the time. Online, and that can really get people lost too. But yeah, I think really when you sort of breaking it down, I feel it's hard for people to sort of differentiate the good food and the bad food, but for the most part people tend to know what good food is and bad food is, and if they don't, well, we'll go over that pretty quickly and sort of just dispel any of the myths. But the thing that I've found with people really is the problem is like you said, the problem is not them knowing what to eat, it's getting them to eat it. And I think what I found I tend to have to do a lot in the sessions is really break down what people's relationships with food is beforehand, because a lot of times people have a very negative relationship with food. It will be on their mind a lot. They'll always think about it. They won't necessarily, they'll punish themselves and feel guilty for eating maybe like a treat or whatever. And that is really like detrimental to your mindset with like around food. I think I've had sessions where we have not talked about food really at all, but all we've talked about is, okay, so like, I think you need to be more positive to yourself in your self-talk. I think you need to be more forgiving with yourself for eating like a treat, because at the end of the day, these are highly palatable foods that are created, and it's okay to have a treat once in a while. And if you feel guilty around it, it only enhances that negative like connotation with food, and that's not good in the long term anyway. So I really like trying to break that down. People's relationships with food, first and foremost, has really been something that I continue to work on it, because it's not an easy skill to have, and it's oftentimes an incredibly emotional subject for people, like more so than I think I even realized coming into this job. It is an incredibly emotional subject for a lot of people, especially I feel like the women that I work with are a lot more emotional around food than the men. I don't know if it's, you know, the society's standards for women and the fact that they tend to have done the majority of fad diets. I mean, I'll have people who will have done pretty much every diet under the sun, and I have spoken to women who have said that they've been on a diet for the last 30 years, like consistently. They have never really just come off of one. They just jump from one to the other. That doesn't work, jump to the other. And they're all sort of not the answer that they're looking for. And like you said, like that just creates such a negative mindset around food, and that's what we have to break down, and we have to sort of get people to understand that it's okay to eat a sweet treat or to have a slightly higher carb meal or things like that. And breaking down those things, I think, is honestly really liberating for a lot of people. I think they've been fed sort of fad diets through magazines, through now social media, but they've been fed that. I mean, like even before social media, there was the magazines, you know, there was never any getting away from it for these people for the last 30 years. And I think having an answer and having someone to talk to is really, really, really helpful for them to sort of just set the road straight, I guess, and get, answer some of their questions in like an honest manner. And I think they really appreciate that, rather than constantly going back to, like you said, like a one size fits all, like a solution, like the answer. I think they appreciate when you say like there isn't one, and you break it down, you go through it with them, and you explain that answer to them. I think they really like appreciate that, and it's sort of a fresh outlook for them.
It's almost like there's a couple of points really, like it's almost like, and we specialize in fitness after 40, right? So by definition, every single one of our members, whether they're, you know, tackling nutrition right now or not, has certainly done one type of diet at one stage.
Oh yes.
And had some horrendous advice over the years, right? And be told it to you as fact. I always look back at like when I remember my parents both smoked when they were younger. That was way before I was born, because it was healthy to do so.
Yes.
It was thought of as healthy to do so, right? So I was thinking, if that is possible, whereas now we're like, oh my God, smoking is horrendous. It happened with vapes recently, right? And we're supposed to be quite developed people, but vapes got thrown around as if they're suddenly good for you, and then now they're terrible for you.
Because it was promised that they were, yeah.
Yeah. And so it's very similar now. I had some points on with what is out there. Like, I can't stand, there's some influencers, right, that a few years ago were like absolutes, like this is how you have to do, this is doing nutrition. There's a few, I won't even name names because I've never bothered to do that, but some like people that have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of followers, then a few years later, they're now experts in, oh no, I was feeling terrible, I was really disordered eating, everything I was telling you was incorrect, yet they're selling stuff all those times ago. Now they're selling the stuff that they weren't right on.
Yes.
So I'm like, you've made the situation worse.
Yeah, they correct themselves. They make more money off of having a video saying, "Oh, I had disordered eating, and I was leading a pack into the same thing that I was doing."
There was literally one just in the newspaper as having that, having said that. But a few years ago, because I'm obviously aware of all these different things, these people, and they're literally lying to everyone. And so I always think, like, when people, I know how to eat, but I don't know, how to get it done, essentially.
Yeah.
Well, that's because there's so much misinformation and barefaced lies. Not even misinformation, just like lies.
Well, it's funny you say that, like misinformation. There are also, so another thing that I've found too is there are some crazy opinions about food out there based on an article that someone's seen. That is actually really quite interesting, because I think when you look into it, so for like, I told you this before, but for example, someone came in, this was before I was a nutritionist too, this is as the assessor in St. Albans, and I was eating, and she was saying, I don't eat my apple whole anymore. No, I used to enjoy shredded apple on my oatmeal, but I don't shred the apple anymore because I read that it's actually not as good for you shredded as it is whole. And I remember thinking, like, eat the apple, like whether it's shredded or whether it's whole. I think,
how does your body know? Because doesn't it shred it when it goes into your body anyway?
She was saying something about, she'd obviously read this article and had a very, very, an in-depth understanding of like the molecules within the apple, and that if you like, but the thing is that, again, like sort of going forwards, like you're focusing on something that's so tiny. I think also, I think I looked it up because I was genuinely intrigued as to what she'd seen. And it was an article, and the study that they had cited was a thing for a certain demographic, for a certain reason that they were looking at it in the study. And then what had happened was, I guess an article had picked up on the conclusion, taken from the conclusion what they wanted to take from the conclusion, and then said, oh, it's a scientific backed study that says that if you eat your apple whole, it's better for you, you burn more calories than if you eat it shredded. And when you talk about that, you're talking like 2 or 3 calories.
Yeah,
it really is so minute.
Mental energy, right?
Yeah, and they were just doing the study, I guess, as intrigue as to whether you break it down when you grate the apple. Not for a diet or for But an article had picked it up and made a very, very good argument for it.
Yeah.
For it to be like a thing, and people read that and they take that and they think, oh, and I think that's a lot of the myths that are thrown out there. Like the things that contribute to that are people taking from scientific studies without actually explaining the demographic that was used, the reason that study was carried out, who sponsored the study too. There's so many different food companies now that sponsor studies, and if they don't get the result that they want, they sort
of America massively less. Well, it's not uncorrupt over here either.
But you're right, the American. But the thing is that you can get American ones over there too.
Like everything comes over in the end. That's the thing. Like I have a real thought. So obviously I've done articles and stuff for like newspapers, and it's not for the newspaper as such. It's for the journalist who then writes for the newspaper.
Yeah.
And I have kind of an issue, and I'm always a little bit scared when I do it, because of the way they position things and butcher what you say.
Yes.
And like they have to try to make it interesting, like the Apple thing, right? You can't, it has to be interesting. So you have like some stuff on, and they try to equate exercise to like what celebrities are doing.
Yeah.
And it was like, I think it was like maybe Mick Jagger or something. And it was because he's running around on the stage and he's, you know, I can't remember how old he is. Is he 80?
He's in good shape, I think.
Anyway, he's doing a lot of mileage on the stage. And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, I don't know it's necessarily his fitness routine. I just don't know his full lifestyle. I know that he's done a lot of different
Yes,
stuff.
I was
going to
say,
not so healthy for you.
Drugs and
but
rock
that
and
doesn't
roll,
mean
I
that
think.
if we lived the same life, we wouldn't drop down dead, you know? Like,
I would drop down dead, yeah.
that's the thing. There's epigenetics and things, you know?
I mean, he's been doing it for years.
We're all different at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
So to think, I always think you can use like, oh, that could be worth me trying.
Yes.
And I'm not suggesting we'll try Mick Jagger's drugs, but like...
yeah, that's not usually what I recommend, yeah?
No, probably not the one to recommend. But like, oh, you know, having a juice shake, for example, is an easy way for me to get nutrients in. Let's just say that. It's worth trying, right? But yeah, I think there is an issue with the information that's put out there because, and certainly more so now with social media, it has to get your attention.
Oh yes, and they're very, very good at that.
Oh, they're exceptional.
These companies are incredibly good at that. I mean, I'm like, even knowing what I know, I tend to click on things because I'm intrigued as to what they're saying. You know, where did they get this information from? What are they selling? And it's incredibly like well thought through, well written. I mean, it's people who obviously know how to capture attention and make things sound legit. And that's why I think it's so hard to get the correct information out there, because it's kind of boring. Like it's not not a clickbait, is it? It's like, oh, like just calories in versus calories out. Like people are like, nah, you know, that's not interesting. It doesn't like it's not a quick fix. It's not the answer that people are looking for. So people tend to make up the answer that people are looking for to get clicks and to get views and to get money. And that's essentially the issue that you have, is that there's a lot of people who just are unfortunately caught in that cycle, and it's not their fault. You know, it's an incredibly easy thing to get confused by. Like I said, even like myself, I get, you know, confused by things. I've got to look it up. I've got to make sure that I understand what is going on there, because there's so much information out there that it is so difficult to decipher what's what. And I think it's an unfortunate thing for people to have to go through, because it really is a detriment, like, and it can affect people for years and like their whole life. Like not knowing what to eat or how to eat correctly. And it's a hard thing to go through, and to see people, you know, going through that when it's not their fault. They really just did not have someone to push and guide them in the correct direction. And it's a shame for those people, because I think when they realize it, like you can just sort of see like the fog lift in a way. I think, and I've had that a couple times through my sessions so far, and hopefully many more to come. But it's a really nice feeling for them, but also for me as well, to see them like start to understand that there's no right answer, and food is there to be enjoyed. I think that's something that we can forget too when it comes to diets, is that food is there to be enjoyed. We are human. It is something that we enjoy doing. You're allowed to go out and have a meal and social meal with your family, and you shouldn't feel like you have to sort of say no to this, or you can't go out for the meal because you don't want to be tempted by the dessert or whatever, you know, and things like that. And people have deprived themselves of those kind of social situations far too many times, unfortunately, because of all that misinformation out there, and fad diets and things and quick fixes. Spent a hell of a lot of money on those too, which is unfortunate as well.
I have, because you mentioned about calories in, calories out, I have a real issue with this one, right? So I have an issue with, like we talked about earlier about absolutes, right? So, but influencers then suddenly became, right, it's just calories in, calories out.
Yes. And
okay, fit, like health, nutrition, training, whatever, it doesn't get done in a laboratory. So calories in, calories out is laboratory thinking, right? That is, strictly speaking, true. It's a fact. Fine. But how you get there is how it's the important thing to understand.
Yes.
And when you're like, because we're humans, right? So there is psychology, emotions involved. So if it was just as simple as eating fewer calories than you expend, well, there would be no fat loss. Like there would be everyone would be exactly the weight they wanted to be, etc.
Yes.
But it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Because if you don't eat enough calories for a few period of time, you are queuing yourself up to binge, like inevitably, because we're humans. And like I know what it's like. So often I'll do a lot of training in the week. I do a lot of different things, jiu-jitsu and weightlifting and stuff. But if I'm not on point with my nutrition, I can go 2-3 days, really not enough calories at all.
Yes.
Because I have to eat that many because I'm expending a lot.
Yeah.
I know I'm queuing myself up to then suddenly by Thursday, I'm like, I have to eat more.
Yes.
You know, and I'm not looking for, more calories from, I don't know, broccoli.
Yeah.
I'm looking for,
your body craves the high density calorie stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not always like fat loss. It's just like health. I don't particularly want to be binging on unhealthy foods because at the end of the day, you do that for too long. From that. You have negative effects, right?
Yes.
And that's that laboratory thinking. And I also have this issue around like the influencer side of it. Again, where a lot of like they're saying things. I did a video on it. I said again about like, if you just walk up the stairs, you're like part of the 1%. It's like just a very judgmental kind of thing. And I'm like, I know you've just been lean like your life. You've not had to learn about nutrition and stuff. You've just done naturally lean.
Yes.
Doesn't give you the right to start judging others.
And it does not give you the right to then start selling things that you've never done, which is what happens. Yes. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, I think, because nutrition is not done in a laboratory. It's done when you had 3 hours sleep because your children were up all night. Like it's done when you're feeling a bit poorly. Like it's done in real life.
Yes.
So you have to, these things are guides. Like, okay, the principle is true, but how I get there is actually the habit, the hard part. Right?
And that's also the bit where, again, I think there is a lot of diets, or I mean, maybe I feel like there's things like fad diets, right? So sort of like the Atkins diet. Then there's some things which are slightly more like reasonable and methods that I'll use as well if people want to give it a go. But things like intermittent fasting, for example, that is the reason it works is not because because you fast for this amount of time. The reason it works is because it puts you in a deficit. That's the reason it works. It almost forces you into a deficit because you're not going to eat the same amount in 4 hours as you would do in 12, right? So it forces you into a deficit, which is sometimes can be quite severe. But it doesn't. That's again is the thing. People will be like, oh well, I'm still, I'm on this intermittent fasting thing. I'm fasting. I'm eating only for 8 hours every day. I'm fasting for the rest of it. But again, like the thing is, if you're eating over like a massive amount of calories in those 8 hours, then the reason it's not working is because it's not putting you into a deficit. That's the thing is that again, but same thing with like a high protein diet, for example. The reason it works is because the protein is the most satiating macro. So when you're eating that, your body, you don't want to eat the rest of it. So again, it puts you into a deficit. That's the whole, and that's the thing that again, people will run with and they'll go, oh, but I'm doing this intermittent fasting. It's not working for me. But the thing is, again, like you said, there's so many other factors that are involved. Did you sleep enough is one. Are you hydrated enough is two. Like there's so many other factors. Like are you eating, what are you eating in that intermittent fasting window? Because if you're eating like a load of ice cream, that's not great. That's not going to put you, that's not going to benefit you health wise. And it's certainly not going to cause you to lose weight, so there's so many other factors that go into it that I think, again, people sort of run off of one thing, like you said, whether that be calories in, calories out, whether that be intermittent fasting, whether that be a certain fad diet. They run off of one of those things rather than looking at the whole picture. And I mean, like when you sort diet, you really have to look at the whole picture. Like you have to look at every single like routine in your day, because again, food revolves around the majority of your day revolves around food. I mean, we eat breakfast in the morning, right? And then we have lunch at work or in the middle of the day or whatever. And then we have dinner in the evening. When we go out to a movie, there's snacks. When you go out and do this, there's food. You know, there's always food. Our life revolves around food.
It's a pivotal part of life, right?
Yes,
You need it. You need it.
Every big event that we do as humans pretty much has food. I mean, even now sports events, there's always like a bacon butty or something you can get on the sideline, and a coffee or whatever. Like food is everywhere. So I think like those kind of ones, like we spoke about, that one size fits all doesn't work necessarily, because again, everyone, like, our life revolves around food, and everyone's life looks different. Everyone's lifestyle habits are different. And it would be impossible for me to say, do this, because for some people, I mean, your habits individually as people look so different. I mean, for example, like whenever I'm sure, you know, I don't know if this was your experience with your wife, but when you go to someone else's house and you see their customs, right? And you have to get used to maybe a different way of living in a way. Like, everyone lives very differently. So a habit, or it's like, I'm trying to think of an example that would be simple, but I don't know. It's like some people like sit down at the table for dinner, but another family would sit down at the sofa. You know, so again, there's so many different, like, and that's just like one small example. I'm sure you could point out hundreds when you go to someone else's house and think that's a different, we don't do that in my house. But it's the same way with nutrition, is that, so every single person's habits around food is very different, because not everyone does everything the same way. Each household has their own way of living. So you have to sort of look at each routine around food for that person and then sort of adjust from there. That's why, again, it doesn't work when you're pushing this one size fits all, because no one lives the same. So how are you all going to follow the same thing? It doesn't work.
I agree. It just doesn't work. And I really think the way to go about things is, I like indirect things. So everyone's always looking like, what should I cut out, or what should I do? I like initially to build, and this is what we believe, to build confidence by doing things that have quite a big radiating effect. I always like the thought of like, because what we're talking about is people not having confidence in themselves often because of all the things that have been said. Whereas, so if you can say, right, okay, so I always like the easy ones, like drink a certain amount of water to start with, because you don't have to convince someone that water's good for you.
Yes.
And by drinking that has a radiating effect of, you know what, I feel less hungry. I didn't realize I was dehydrated. Now that was actually not hunger, it was dehydration.
Yeah.
And so just drinking water can have a big radiating effect. And I think that's the way to almost correct a lot of these kind of the misinformation that a lot of people had, is to give them small things have big impacts that build confidence.
Yes.
Rather than most people, when it comes to nutrition, I'm just gonna, like the fasting one, I'm just gonna not eat for 16 hours.
Yes.
Which, you know, that might work for a little period of time, but it's probably not the first thing you should go to, I don't think. Because there's small wins build on. And what you're looking to do really when you're doing nutrition coaching of any sort is to build confidence in themselves to be able to do it. Like at the end of the day. Not to like not have confidence in themselves and just there's no future in that.
Yes. Yeah. I 100% agree on that statement, because the confidence is so important. It's so important. The confidence to be able to do this is so important. It is something that has slowly over time been eroded away because of the constant battles with food and the diet here and putting all the weight back on and then going back and then going forwards and up, down, up, down, up, down. And it's just a constant battle for these people, and confidence just drops. It plummets because nothing works for them, or it doesn't. And oftentimes having the confidence and setting those small habits out and having them see changes, even if it's not on the scale as well. That has to be said, that there's so much emphasis placed on the scale, which is unfortunate, I think, because you make a lot of changes that you maybe don't see, you definitely don't see on the scale. But I think like things like drinking water is a great way to start and build that confidence. And I go even smaller, to be honest, in some cases, with the sort of building habits, or it'd be something like really tiny, like, hey, hold a 30-second quad stretch while you're brushing your teeth. You know, something so tiny that it's manageable, doable, and then it's like, okay, wait, hang on a second. I did my my knees do hurt a little bit less now. Okay, I'm seeing results of such a tiny thing. And it doesn't, like, you know, drinking water is one, but again, even then I would break that down into like, okay, let's start drinking a liter. How much do you like regularly drink?
Yeah.
A liter. Okay,
not suddenly go into like 3 liters straight away, right?
Yeah,
No.
I mean that would be hard for a lot of people. So breaking it down and allowing them to build up that confidence around themselves, because also I think something that helps a lot is just telling them that, like, explain them this, you know, that it's not them, that it is the fact that they have been trying so many different diets, that that are designed to fail almost. You know, it's not that they can't do it. It's that they have been fed the wrong information for so long. And usually I'm quite impressed by how long they've managed to do it, to be honest. So it's definitely not them. It's not a willpower, you know.
No. If anything, people have got really good willpower to, like...
Oh, yeah.
If you've ever had, like, I don't know, 500, sometimes 1,200, like, super low calorie diets, anything below... What's a super low calorie? Anything below 900 or something, I think there's a definition.
I mean, I would think anything below 1,200 for me is a really low diet.
100%. Like, anything, I think sub 15 for 1,500 for most people,
yes.
to be honest.
Yes, I would agree.
Low, right? But, like, to be able to sustain that for a period of time, you've got to have good, like, commitment, because it's not fun whatsoever. And
it's funny, actually, you remind me that there was a point that you mentioned about, you know, when you have several low calorie days, and then you go and you would have a high calorie day. And it's funny, you know, obviously a lot of people that I see do have that unfortunate sort of, they fall into that unfortunate cycle of binge eating, and maybe not necessarily binge eating in a way that you know, it's connotated, but having several low days and a high day and then feeling real guilty about it. But the thing is that sometimes I'll use, again, like another method that I'll use sometimes would be to track calories. And I think that's a good method for education purposes. I tend to enjoy, like, having people educate themselves through doing that. Again, doesn't work for everybody, and I wouldn't recommend it for everybody. I tend to discuss sort of what relationship is with food first. But that, I will often see people doing that, and I'll say, okay, well, if we look back at the week, every single, and it's crazy because it all makes sense once you look at the numbers. Sometimes it can really, like, click, and it's like every single high calorie day comes after the lowest one.
Yeah,
you know, and it'll be like a sort of like a, and then it'll go up, and then it'll, and being able to sort of see that in, I mean, they literally do like a graph, like a bar chart. So being able to see that, I think people realize that actually going down to numbers that are not really sustainable leads to then going up. And whilst we know that, seeing it on paper really sort of hits home, and it's like, oh, I would actually just be better if I just stayed steady. You know, if I just increased what I think I'm allowed to eat to a reasonable number and just kept it at that, then I would actually have far more results than this horrible cycle, which is, you know, even if you're eating an average of the same calories, right? The toll that it takes on you mentally to feel so guilty around food, to feel like you're failing every time you're eating in those high calorie days, I think, you know, it's worth just staying steady at a higher calorie intake.
100%. Well, so there is actually, and I did it, I did it for a long period of time. There is a where you can calorie cycle, where you can have low days, medium days, high days, depending on what exercise you're doing, different things. So there is a way of eating it. But the thing with that is it's intentional. And I always think with nutrition, it's the non-intentional things that damage people's confidence. So if I'm low, and suddenly I'm binging, well, like you said, I'm feeling bad about that. Whereas if I was intentional with it, I wouldn't, because I'm doing it on purpose. And that's the critical thing.
I mean, it's the same. It's the same thing as, like, some people like to do a refeed day. Where they have a higher carb, and that's fine. Again, like you said, there tends to be more athletes or people who are training for something. But again, like you said, if it's intentional, you're aware of it, so it's okay. And it's obviously, you're aware of it, and it's helping you to reach a specific target or a goal. But yeah, the issue comes when sort of, as you said, that people are not aware of it. And I think seeing the numbers really can help people to just be like, oh, I see what you're saying now, because you can say it until you're blue in the face. But people will be like, no, that's not me. I don't do that. But then when, it's them putting their numbers in and then us looking back at it over the week, then it'll be like, oh, I see. Like there is like obviously relationships between low days and high days. And then I think also there's that moment of, it's not me. It's not my fault. I can see that there is obviously like it's my body just trying to get enough calories.
Yeah, and like it's millions and millions of years of evolution.
Yeah,
that actually means that you then will make you eat, because that's how it used to work, right?
Yes. Like our body is.
But we just have too much availability.
Yeah. Oh yes. Way too much availability now. It's so easy to just get foods and high calorie foods at that. So it's incredibly hard to. I mean, that's why it's so hard that people struggle so hard, like to lose weight, because the foods that we have are so calorie dense, because that's what we enjoy. Because before, obviously, if we had a calorie dense food, we would want to eat it because we don't know when we're going to get our next meal.
Yeah, 100%.
But now,
so we were actually, it's like, fitter and healthier, like as cavemen, maybe, like whatever they want to say, but never actually had to battle with it. It was just. I imagine if there was loads of, I don't know, cakes and crisps and stuff, the cavemen would have been out of they would have been
in the same position we are. Yeah,
they
would have just sat there and eaten all of that as well. And that's the thing is that it's not really. Yeah, we can't go back to those times where we battle for our food and fight off animals. I certainly wouldn't survive. But the thing is that because it's so readily available now, we have to be able to educate people on what you can eat. I don't say can and can't, actually, to be fair, because I think you know everything in moderation. But what does moderation look like? I think is important for people to understand, because I don't like to say you can't eat anything. I think that all food is food, and that's fine. And because I think once you start connotating like bad foods and good foods. You can develop maybe like a slightly skew view of food, which you shouldn't do. You should never feel guilty eating something. You should be confident that when you're eating it, it's okay, because you understand that you know it's in your you can eat it today, because that 80-20, like 80% of your food is good food, and then 20% you can have as a treat.
This is interesting because obviously I've got 2 young children, and so. Obviously, I'm very interested in fitness and health, obviously.
Yeah.
But really, my wife and I are thinking about how do you talk about food to children? So obviously did a lot of reading around it. And we all tend to focus on how do you feel? So it's not like good or bad. Like I'm not like, we're not super strict with them at all. Like, they go to parties, they eat cake, it's fine.
Yeah.
But it's the understanding of how foods make them feel.
That's interesting, actually.
Yeah, so rather than focusing on good or bad, because again, you're creating that feeling that food is either good or bad, which is just not the case.
Yes.
So it's like, okay, like my son who's a little bit older would know he's going to go do sport. He's not going to have his cake before he goes to do sport.
Yes.
He's probably not going to feel very good.
Yes, that's true.
Right? So it's more that feeling of what makes me feel good, what doesn't, with the hope that you understand intrinsically, because no one really, sometimes if he eats something that's, I can't even remember what it does, but it'll make him have a sore stomach. Well, he doesn't want to have a sore stomach, so he inevitably, he's literally come to me not long ago and be like, oh, I've had some of, I can't remember what it was, but I've had some, I'm not going to have any more because I don't want a bad tummy.
Yeah.
And that's him self-regulating.
Yes.
Which I thought was, a real good thing.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you say that, actually, because I certainly, haven't really looked into how, kids interact with food, but very often, most of the time, your relationship with food starts at the childhood.
Most life starts at that, right? Up until subconscious mind, what's it? Isn't it 0 till 7 or something? So it's like it's very much in your formative years.
Yes. And a lot of times when I've had that discussion with people breaking down their relationship with food, it often comes back to, oh, well, my mum always told me I looked fat, or like my mum told me I shouldn't eat that because, it made me fat. Or my dad didn't want me to do that because this would happen or whatever. So immediately, like, these people have drawn like conclusions about themselves and also about the food around them from their parents. And like obviously unintentionally, you know, like oftentimes they'll be like, oh, I love my mum, but you know, this is like sort of the thing that's happened. And again, it's just a lack of understanding and awareness about what those comments can do. It's like, you know, as you get older, you know, for boys and girls, you know, and especially that then carries on into teenage years, where people often have struggles with food and their weight and things like that. So yeah, and there are people who it's funny, like as a kid you can identify the two kinds too quite well. You know, people who do have that sort of tense relationship with food and the ones who don't, and yeah, at the time you don't realize it, but looking back, I do think it had a lot to do with how it was viewed at home, how food was viewed at home, what was spoken about, how it was spoken about. You know, like if parents are speaking about food in a negative way, that becomes ingrained in you to also think about food in a negative way. So it's interesting.
Well, this is critical, right? So if you think about the people we members and things, often they have children, if not grandchildren, but certainly children and then grandchildren. How you talk about like yourself, your own relationship with food is what people copy. Like they always think in terms of more is caught than taught. So I can tell you, but actually you're just going to watch what I do, you know? So if I'm like, eat this, but then I'm eating something completely different, well, that's what you see. And so it's like, I would never think, oh, you know, I'm sure every generation gives something to their children, right? That then they take on, and then when they're adults, they're like, I can't believe that my parents did this to me. And I'm sure our children will be the same. I don't know what it is. I think about that a lot. Think about what am I giving them, but I try my best. But I'm sure there's going to be something, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
But I suppose it's not, you can't be blaming the whole time. Everyone's just doing their best.
Yes, yeah.
It's up to you to take responsibility now and understand. I think that's the understanding that you don't have to blame your parents for the rest of your life that you eat a certain way. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like you can take control of it.
Yes.
And there is a way to do it. And perhaps the things that you've tried before, like different diets and things, haven't been the solution for you, but that doesn't mean doesn't mean there isn't one.
Yes,
there is.
Yeah, and I think also, I think the first step to sort of, I guess, reevaluating your relationship with food is identifying where it started. And again, that doesn't come from blame either. And I think that's what a lot of people realized, you know, during our discussions, was that it doesn't come from blame, but identifying it can be quite a relief almost. Like, oh, I see now where it started, like the root of the problem. So suddenly it seems a little bit like, okay, so I know where the root of the problem is. How do I now go about sort of changing that and altering that? But identifying it, I always say to people, like, more information is always better. Like, people feel like sometimes they think it's bad information. But at the end of the day, more information is always better. You can always do more with more information. And if you know where that started and you're able to identify that, first off, that's a win on self-reflection and, you know, being able to identify that. I think it can give you a bit of confidence too, because you understand that maybe it wasn't just you again. That sort of understanding that, wow, there's so many other factors that play into this that you don't even realize. Like, it's really not just a battle of willpower. Because otherwise a lot of the people I spoke to would have won already with the willpower that they have. But being able to identify that and just being steered in the right direction. You know, I think once you steer people in the right direction, they tend to do incredibly well, because, again, I guess the battle of the willpower, their willpower is steel. It's like steel because of how many diets they've done and they've been able to stick to. Their willpower is good. It's not their willpower that's the problem. So once you steer them in the correct direction, it really is usually quite a liberating sort of diet in a way, I guess. Changing that like lifestyle can be quite liberating for people, which I really enjoy seeing, and I just try and encourage people to keep doing it. You know, when we meet up, and again, the finding a positive thing to speak about as well is another thing that I tend to do with people, because they'll come on the call, and I still find this a lot. Oh, well, this week wasn't very good. Okay, let's have a look at this week. Oh, well, you know, this looked good. This was good. This was good. why do you think it was bad? And they were, oh, well, I had like one bad day and I drank, maybe too much wine or whatever. And then you look at in the grand scheme of things, and, I think when you look back at where you started from, and you were having 2 bottles of wine, and now we're having 2 glasses, that's not a bad day. This is very, very good, and in a short span of time.
Well, so that's the progress, not perfection thing, which we're going to have to talk about on future podcasts, because we are reaching the end of our time.
Yeah.
So we had a few things to like chat about. We only really kind of got to the first one. But if we're going to round up then, because we started with why is there no one size fits all when it comes to nutrition?
Yeah.
Let's put that into bullet points just to finish the episode.
Ooh, okay. There's no one size fits all because everybody's lifestyle is different. Everybody's relationship with food is different. Everybody's habits or culture is different. So again, really, I mean, you could go on and on about what's different in everybody, but there is nothing that will fit everybody, because there is nothing that can answer to everybody's independent needs. I think it really is a very simplified version of why there is no one size fits all, because there is no one person. Everyone
we're all
is
individuals.
different. Yeah, exactly. And that's it. And everybody needs their own individual diet that works for them, not something that works for 1 million subscribers or whatever, because it's not. Yeah. That is not the case at all. But yeah, I would say like that would be a simplified version of why there is no one size fits all. I don't know if you would have any bullet points to add on to that.
No, I think that covers it all. I just think there's no absolutes, there's no one size fits all, and you just haven't found the right thing for you yet.
Yeah.
So don't give up, essentially.
Yes. Yeah, and that's okay as well. I think it's important to say as well that is okay. Like, it's not easy to do it, and especially when you don't have the help. And for people beat themselves up so much about it, but it's okay. Like, it's okay to start again and to finally try and find the correct diet for you.
Agreed. Right. Well, Laura, thank you very much.
No, thank you. Thank you very much.
Do this again.
Yes.
And we'll be on next time.
Wonderful.